Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates painted their nails and talked about boys, she spent weekends at the shooting range with her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who taught her that precision and patience were more valuable than any makeup kit. The steady hands that once helped her grandmother with delicate embroidery now held rifles with the same gentle confidence. At 22, Sarah enlisted in the Army, much to her parents' surprise and concern. Her mother had hoped she would become a teacher or nurse, something safe and traditional. But Sarah felt a calling stronger than small-town expectations. She wanted to serve her country and prove that women could excel in roles traditionally dominated by men. Basic training was brutal. The drill sergeants showed no mercy, especially to the female recruits. Sarah endured the harsh physical demands, the screaming and the doubt from some of her male counterparts who whispered that women didn't belong in combat roles. But every evening as she cleaned her rifle with meticulous care, she remembered her grandfather's words about persistence and purpose. Her marksmanship scores quickly caught attention. While other recruits struggled to hit targets at 200 yards, Sarah consistently scored bullseyes at 400. Her steady breathing technique, learned from years of hunting deer in the Texas Hill Country, gave her an advantage that natural talent alone couldn't provide. The range instructor, Sergeant Williams, pulled her aside after a particularly impressive shooting session. "Martinez, you've got something special," he said, watching her disassemble her rifle with practiced efficiency. "Ever think about sniper school?" The question surprised her. Sniper training was elite, demanding, and predominantly male. Few women had ever attempted it, and fewer still had succeeded. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This could be her chance to prove herself beyond anyone's expectations, but it would also mean facing challenges she had never imagined. After completing basic training with honors, Sarah received orders to report to Fort Benning for advanced individual training. Her military occupational specialty would be infantry, a field that had only recently opened to women in combat roles. The political debates and media attention surrounding women in combat meant that every female soldier carried extra pressure to succeed. The bus ride to Fort Benning gave Sarah time to reflect on her decision. She watched the Georgia countryside roll past the windows, thinking about the path that had led her here. Her grandfather had died 2 years earlier, but she could still hear his voice teaching her about wind direction, breathing control, and the mental discipline required for precision shooting. He had always believed in her abilities even when others doubted. At Fort Benning, Sarah met other soldiers who would become her training unit. The atmosphere was different from basic training, more serious, more focused. These soldiers had chosen specific career paths, and the training would be more specialized and demanding. Sarah noticed she was one of only 3 women in her entire company, and the only one pursuing infantry training. Her bunkmate was Jessica, a communications specialist from California who seemed as nervous as Sarah felt. They bonded over late-night conversations about their fears, dreams, and the weight of representing all women in their respective fields. Jessica admitted she sometimes felt like quitting, but Sarah encouraged her to stay strong. The first few weeks of training covered basic infantry tactics, weapons handling, and field exercises. Sarah excelled in marksmanship training, but struggled with some of the physical demands that relied more on upper body strength. She spent extra hours in the gym, building muscle and endurance, determined not to let physical limitations hold her back. During a field exercise simulating urban combat, Sarah's unit was tasked with clearing a mock village. Her role was to provide overwatch from an elevated position, while her team moved through the streets below. As she settled into position with her rifle, adjusting the scope and checking wind conditions, she felt a sense of calm purpose that reminded her of hunting trips with her grandfather. The exercise went perfectly. Sarah's accurate fire support helped her team navigate the mock battlefield without casualties. Her precise shots eliminated multiple targets, and her clear communication kept the team informed of threats they couldn't see. After the exercise, several of her male teammates approached her with genuine respect and appreciation. That was some serious shooting. "Martinez," said Private Johnson, a former college football player who had initially been skeptical of women in infantry roles. "You saved our asses out there." These moments of acceptance meant everything to Sarah. She was slowly proving that skill and dedication mattered more than gender stereotypes. But she also knew that one good performance wasn't enough. Every day brought new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself. Word of Sarah's shooting abilities began to spread among the instructors. During a routine marksmanship evaluation, she scored perfect marks at distances that challenged even experienced soldiers. Her consistency and precision under pressure impressed everyone who witnessed her performance. One evening, as Sarah was cleaning her rifle in the barracks, Sergeant First Class Rodriguez approached her. He was a veteran sniper instructor with multiple combat deployments. Known for his no-nonsense attitude and impossibly high standards. "Martinez, I've been watching your progress," he said, sitting down across from her. "Your shooting scores are exceptional, but that's just the beginning. Sniper school is about more than marksmanship. It's about mental toughness, patience, and the ability to make split-second decisions under extreme pressure." Sarah looked up from her rifle, meeting his intense gaze. "I understand, Sergeant. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Rodriguez studied her for a long moment. "The next sniper course starts in 6 weeks. If you're interested, I can recommend you for evaluation, but I'll warn you now. It's the toughest training the Army offers. Many experienced soldiers don't make it through. The instructors will test every limit you think you have, then push you beyond them." Sarah's heart raced with excitement and nervousness. This was the opportunity she had dreamed about, but it was also terrifying. Sniper school represented the ultimate test of everything she had learned and trained for. Success would open doors to elite units and specialized missions. Failure would mean returning to regular infantry duties, with the knowledge that she had fallen short of her highest aspirations. "I want to try, Sergeant," she said quietly, but firmly. "I know it won't be easy, but I believe I can do it." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "I'll submit your paperwork tomorrow. Use the next 6 weeks to prepare yourself mentally and physically. Study everything you can about ballistics, weather effects, and fieldcraft. And Martinez, don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong there. You've earned this chance." The United States Army Sniper School at Fort Benning was a place where legends were born and dreams were shattered. Sarah arrived on a humid Monday morning in June, carrying her duffel bag and a mixture of determination and anxiety that had kept her awake for most of the previous night. The building looked ordinary from the outside, but she knew that behind those walls lay the most challenging military training program in the world. 24 candidates had been selected for this course, representing the best marksmen from various units across the Army. Sarah was the only woman among them, a fact that became immediately apparent as she joined the formation outside the main building. The other candidates ranged from experienced infantry soldiers to special forces veterans, all carrying themselves with the confidence that came from proven combat experience. Chief Warrant Officer Thompson, the lead instructor, emerged from the building with the purposeful stride of someone who had seen more combat than most soldiers could imagine. His weathered face and intense eyes immediately commanded respect from every candidate present. Behind him followed 3 other instructors, each wearing the distinctive crossed rifles badge of qualified snipers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thompson began, his voice carrying easily across the formation, "welcome to the most demanding course the United States Army has to offer. Over the next 7 weeks, we will push you beyond every limit you think you have. We will test your marksmanship, your fieldcraft, your mental toughness, and your ability to make life-and-death decisions under extreme pressure." He paused, scanning the faces of the candidates. "Look around you. Historically, only 40% of the soldiers who begin this course will graduate. The rest will be eliminated for various reasons: poor marksmanship, inability to handle stress, failure to master fieldcraft skills, or simply lacking the mental fortitude required to be a sniper." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she absorbed the statistics. She had known the course would be difficult, but hearing the failure rate stated so bluntly made the challenge feel more real and immediate. The first week focused on fundamentals that would build the foundation for everything that followed. The candidates learned advanced ballistics, studying how environmental factors like temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and wind affected bullet trajectory. Sarah had always been good at math, but the calculations required for long-range precision shooting were more complex than anything she had encountered. Each morning began with physical training designed to test endurance and mental toughness. The instructors pushed the candidates through grueling exercises while carrying heavy packs and weapons, simulating the physical demands they would face in actual combat situations. Sarah struggled more than some of the larger male candidates, but her determination and refusal to quit earned grudging respect from her peers. The marksmanship training started with known distance targets, allowing candidates to learn their rifles and develop consistent shooting techniques. Sarah quickly established herself as one of the top shooters in the class, consistently hitting targets that others found challenging. Her natural ability, combined with years of practice and her grandfather's teachings, gave her a significant advantage. But marksmanship was only one component of sniper training. The candidates also learned camouflage and concealment techniques, studying how to blend into various environments and remain undetected for hours or even days. They practiced stalking exercises, attempting to move close to instructor positions without being spotted, a skill that required patience, creativity, and an almost supernatural ability to read terrain. During one particularly challenging stalking exercise, Sarah spent 6 hours moving 300 yards through thick woods, covering her rifle and equipment with natural materials and moving only inches at a time when the instructors weren't looking directly at her position. The exercise tested every aspect of fieldcraft, requiring candidates to plan their routes carefully and execute movements with precision timing. As she lay motionless behind a fallen log, waiting for the right moment to advance, Sarah thought about the mental discipline required for this type of warfare. Snipers operated alone or in small teams, often spending days in observation positions waiting for the perfect moment to take a shot. The psychological pressure of such operations would be immense, requiring a level of mental toughness that went far beyond physical capability. The academic portion of the course covered topics that most infantry soldiers never encountered. The candidates studied military intelligence, learning to recognize enemy equipment, uniforms, and tactics. They learned about range estimation techniques, using various methods to accurately determine distances to targets without laser rangefinders. Sarah excelled in the classroom, taking detailed notes and asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated her understanding of complex concepts. Her attention to detail and analytical thinking impressed the instructors, who had initially been skeptical about having a female candidate in the course. But it was during the unknown distance shooting exercises that Sarah truly began to distinguish herself from her peers. These exercises required candidates to engage targets at various ranges, without being told the exact distances, forcing them to use their training in range estimation and environmental assessment to make accurate shots. While other candidates struggled to consistently hit targets beyond 400 yards, Sarah was regularly engaging and hitting targets at 600 yards and beyond. Her natural ability to read wind conditions, combined with her methodical approach to each shot, allowed her to achieve accuracy that impressed even the veteran instructors. Staff Sergeant Wilson, one of the marksmanship instructors, pulled her aside after a particularly impressive shooting session. "Martinez, your shooting is exceptional," he said, watching as she carefully cleaned her rifle. "But I want you to understand something important. Being a sniper isn't just about being able to shoot accurately. You'll be operating in high-stress situations where lives depend on your decisions." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "I appreciate that, Sergeant. I'm trying to prepare myself mentally for those situations." Wilson studied her for a moment. "The other candidates are watching you closely. Some of them respect what you're accomplishing, but others are looking for any sign of weakness. Don't give them one." The warning proved prophetic. As the course progressed and the stress increased, some of the candidates began to show signs of strain. The combination of academic pressure, physical demands, and the constant threat of elimination created an atmosphere of intense competition and barely controlled tension. One evening, as Sarah was studying ballistics charts in the barracks common area, she overheard a conversation between several male candidates who were discussing the difficulties they were having with certain aspects of the course. "I don't understand how Martinez makes those shots look so easy," said Specialist Carter, a veteran of 2 combat deployments. "She's hitting targets that I'm missing consistently." Another candidate, Private First Class Davis, responded with barely concealed resentment. "Maybe the instructors are going easy on her because she's a woman. You know how it is with all this equal opportunity stuff." Sarah felt her face flush with anger, but she forced herself to remain calm and continue studying. She'd expected this type of attitude, but hearing it expressed so directly still stung. The suggestion that her success was due to preferential treatment rather than skill and hard work was both insulting and motivating. The next day brought a major milestone. In the course, the first formal evaluation shooting test, candidates would be required to engage multiple targets at various unknown distances, demonstrating their ability to apply everything they had learned about marksmanship, range estimation, and environmental assessment. As Sarah prepared her equipment and settled into her shooting position, she thought about all the people who had doubted her abilities and all those who had believed in her potential. This test would be an opportunity to prove that her success was based on merit alone. The morning of the major evaluation arrived with typical Georgia humidity that made every piece of equipment feel heavier and every movement more labored. Sarah woke before dawn, as had become her habit throughout the course, using the quiet hours to review her notes and mentally prepare for the challenges ahead. Today's test would determine which candidates had mastered the fundamental skills necessary to continue in the program. The firing range was set up with targets at distances ranging from 300 to 800 yards, positioned at various elevations and angles to test the candidate's ability to calculate complex ballistic solutions under pressure. Each candidate would have 45 minutes to engage 12 targets with no opportunity for ranging shots or do-overs. Success required perfect integration of marksmanship, mathematics, and mental composure. Sarah arrived at the range 30 minutes early, using the time to check her equipment and settle into the focused mindset that had served her well throughout the course. Her rifle was a precision instrument that she had learned to know intimately, every characteristic of its trigger, the exact point of impact at various distances, and how it responded to different environmental conditions. As the other candidates arrived, she could sense the tension that filled the air like a physical presence. Several of the men were engaging in nervous conversation, discussing wind conditions and target distances, but Sarah preferred silence. She had learned from her grandfather that too much talk before a critical shot could interfere with the mental clarity required for precision shooting. Chief Warrant Officer Thompson addressed the candidates with his usual no-nonsense demeanor. "Gentlemen and lady," he began, acknowledging Sarah with a slight nod. "Today's evaluation will test everything you've learned over the past 3 weeks. You'll engage targets at unknown distances under time pressure. We're looking for consistent accuracy, proper shot sequence, and the ability to make quick but accurate range estimations." He paused, scanning the faces of the candidates. "Remember, in combat, you won't get second chances. Every shot must count and every decision must be correct. Those who fail to meet our standards will be eliminated from the course immediately following this evaluation." The candidates were called to the firing line in groups of 6, with Sarah placed in the third group. This gave her time to observe the performance of those who went before her, noting which targets seemed to be causing the most difficulty and observing how environmental conditions were affecting bullet trajectories. She watched as the first group took their positions, noting that several candidates were struggling with targets beyond 500 yards. The wind was shifting periodically, requiring constant adjustment and careful timing of shots. 2 candidates from the first group failed to engage all 12 targets within the time limit, and one missed so many shots that his elimination seemed certain. When Sarah's turn came, she moved to her assigned firing position with calm deliberation. She spread her shooting mat carefully, arranged her equipment for easy access, and settled behind her rifle with the practiced efficiency that had become second nature. The familiar weight of the weapon and the feel of the stock against her shoulder brought a sense of comfort and confidence. The range officer announced the beginning of the exercise, and Sarah immediately began her systematic approach to the challenge. She started by scanning all 12 targets through her rifle scope, mentally noting their approximate distances and the environmental factors that would affect each shot. Her grandfather had taught her the importance of having a plan before taking action, and this methodical approach had served her well throughout her military training. Her first target was a silhouette positioned at approximately 400 yards, requiring a relatively straightforward calculation, but demanding precision in execution. Sarah took her time with the range estimation, using the mil-dot reticle in her scope and applying the mathematical formulas she had practiced countless times. She calculated the wind effect, adjusted her point of aim accordingly, and squeezed the trigger with the smooth, consistent pressure that had become automatic. The target fell immediately, confirming a successful hit. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before moving to the next target, maintaining the rhythm and mental discipline that would be crucial for completing all 12 engagements within the time limit. As she progressed through the course of fire, Sarah found herself settling into a zone of concentrated focus that blocked out everything except the immediate task at hand. Each target presented its own unique challenges: distance, wind effect, elevation angle, and target size. But her training had prepared her for these variables. The sixth target, positioned at an estimated 650 yards, required the most complex calculation of the exercise. The target was elevated above her position, requiring adjustment for the upward angle, and a crosswind was affecting the bullet's horizontal trajectory. Sarah took extra time with this shot, double-checking her calculations and waiting for a momentary lull in the wind before squeezing the trigger. The sound of the bullet striking the target was clearly audible even at that distance, indicating another successful hit. Sarah allowed herself a brief smile before continuing with the remaining targets. She was ahead of schedule and had maintained perfect accuracy through the first 6 engagements. Meanwhile, she could hear other candidates struggling with their targets. Frustrated voices and the sound of missed shots reminded her that this evaluation was eliminating soldiers who had made it through weeks of demanding training. The pressure was real, and failure meant the end of dreams and months of dedicated effort. Target 7 was positioned at an unusual angle, requiring Sarah to adjust her shooting position and recalculate her ballistic solution from a different perspective. This type of adaptation was something the instructors emphasized constantly. Real combat situations rarely provided perfect shooting positions or ideal conditions. As she settled into her modified position, Sarah heard one of the other candidates in her group expressing frustration with his performance. "This is impossible," he muttered, loud enough for others to hear. "These targets are too small at these distances." Sarah forced herself to ignore the distraction and focus on her own performance. She had learned that success in challenging situations required absolute commitment to the task at hand, without allowing external factors to interfere with concentration and execution. Her shot on target 7 was another clean hit, maintaining her perfect record through the first 7 engagements. She was well within the time limit and feeling confident about her chances of completing the exercise successfully. Target 8 presented a new challenge, a smaller silhouette at approximately 500 yards, positioned in shadow that made precise aiming more difficult. This target was designed to test the candidate's ability to maintain accuracy, even when visual conditions were less than optimal. Sarah took extra time to ensure proper target identification and aiming point selection. In low-light conditions, the tendency was to rush the shot or to aim at a less precise point on the target. Her training had emphasized the importance of maintaining the same high standards regardless of environmental challenges. The shot was successful, but Sarah noticed that her bullet impact was slightly lower than intended. This suggested that the lighting conditions might be affecting her point of aim, requiring a slight adjustment for the remaining targets in similar conditions. As she prepared for target 9, Sarah became aware that some of the candidates around her were running short on time. The sounds of hurried movements and rapid-fire engagements indicated that at least 2 of her fellow candidates were trying to complete their remaining targets quickly, rather than maintaining the careful, methodical approach that the exercise was designed to test. Sarah resisted the temptation to increase her pace. Her grandfather had always emphasized that precision was more important than speed, and her training had reinforced this principle countless times. Better to engage fewer targets with perfect accuracy than to rush through all 12 with marginal results. Target 9 fell cleanly to her 9th shot, maintaining her perfect record. 3 targets remained, and she had plenty of time to complete them with the same careful attention to detail that had characterized her performance throughout the exercise. The 10th target was the most distant of the exercise, positioned at what she estimated to be nearly 800 yards. This was near the maximum effective range for the weapon system they were using, requiring perfect execution of every aspect of the shooting process. Sarah took extra time with her range estimation, using multiple methods to confirm the distance and carefully calculating the ballistic solution. At this range, even small errors in calculation or execution would result in a complete miss. The 800-yard target seemed impossibly small through Sarah's scope, requiring every bit of skill and concentration she had developed over years of training. She steadied her breathing, feeling her heartbeat slow as she entered the focused state that had become her trademark during precision shooting. The world around her faded away until nothing existed except the crosshairs. the target, and the mathematical precision required to connect the two. Her shot broke clean and true, the distant target falling immediately to confirm another perfect hit. 10 targets down, 2 remaining, and still perfect accuracy. Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction before turning her attention to the final challenges of the evaluation. As she prepared for target 11, she noticed that the candidate to her left, Specialist Carter, was clearly struggling. His movements had become hurried and frustrated, and she could see him rushing through his shot sequence in an attempt to complete the exercise within the time limit. This was exactly the type of pressure-induced failure that the instructors were looking for, the inability to maintain standards when stress levels increased. Sarah forced herself to ignore the distraction and focus on her own performance. Target 11 was positioned at a moderate distance, but required shooting through a small gap between 2 larger obstacles, testing the candidate's ability to engage. Targets in cluttered environments typical of urban combat situations. She took her time calculating the shot, accounting for the restricted line of sight and the possibility that her bullet might be affected by the proximity of the obstacles. This type of precision shooting required absolute confidence in ballistic calculations and perfect execution of fundamentals. The shot was successful, striking the target's center mass despite the challenging conditions. 11 targets down, 1 remaining, and her perfect record intact. Sarah felt a surge of confidence as she prepared for the final engagement of the evaluation. The 12th and final target was positioned at approximately 600 yards, but what made it challenging was its small size and the fact that it was partially concealed behind natural cover. This target was designed to test the candidate's ability to engage priority targets even when they presented limited exposure, a skill that would be crucial in actual combat operations. As Sarah studied the target through her scope, she could hear the range officer announcing time warnings for the other candidates. Several were clearly rushing to complete their remaining shots, and she could hear the frustration in their voices as they struggled with the final targets. Sarah took her time with the final shot, knowing that maintaining her perfect record through all 12 targets would send a clear message about her capabilities and preparation. She carefully identified the exact aiming point on the partially concealed target, calculated the ballistic solution one final time, and settled into her shooting position with complete confidence. The final shot was perfect, striking the small visible portion of the target and completing her evaluation with 12 hits out of 12 attempts. Sarah cleared her rifle and stood up from her shooting position, feeling a mixture of relief and pride that she had successfully completed one of the most challenging tests of her military career. As the candidates gathered for the results announcement, Sarah could see the anxiety on many faces. Some had clearly struggled with the evaluation, and everyone knew that eliminations would follow immediately. Chief Warrant Officer Thompson reviewed the scorecards with his characteristic attention to detail before addressing the group. Ladies and gentlemen, today's evaluation has identified several candidates who do not meet our standards for continued training, he announced. The following soldiers will be eliminated from the course effective immediately. He read 7 names from his list, including Specialist Carter and 2 other candidates who had seemed confident at the beginning of the course. Sarah felt sympathy for those being eliminated, knowing how much effort they had invested and how devastating this failure must be for their military careers. The remaining candidates have demonstrated the basic skills necessary to continue in the program, Thompson continued. However, I want to emphasize that the challenges ahead will be significantly more difficult than what you've experienced so far. The advanced phases of this course will test your limits in ways that basic marksmanship cannot prepare you for. After the eliminated candidates departed, Thompson called the remaining 17 soldiers together for a briefing on the next phase of training. You will now begin advanced fieldcraft training, which includes extended stalking exercises, camouflage and concealment, and observation techniques. You'll also start scenario-based training that simulates actual combat conditions. He paused, making eye contact with each remaining candidate. This is where we separate those who can shoot accurately on a known distance range from those who can operate effectively as snipers in combat. The skills you'll learn over the next 3 weeks will determine whether you have what it takes to graduate from this program. The advanced training began immediately with a comprehensive course in camouflage and concealment. The candidates learned to create ghillie suits, natural camouflage systems that would allow them to blend seamlessly into various environments. This was painstaking work that required attention to detail and an artistic understanding of how to replicate natural patterns and textures. Sarah threw herself into this training with the same dedication she had shown to marksmanship. She studied the way light and shadow played across different terrains, learning to see landscapes the way a sniper would see them, as a collection of hiding spots, observation positions, and fields of fire. The stalking exercises were particularly challenging, requiring candidates to move through various terrains while remaining undetected by instructor observers. These exercises tested patience, planning ability, and the capacity to remain motionless for extended periods while maintaining constant alertness. During one memorable exercise, Sarah spent 14 hours moving less than 500 yards through dense woodland, advancing only when environmental conditions and instructor positioning allowed for undetected movement. The mental discipline required for this type of operation was unlike anything she had experienced in her military training. But it was during the observation exercises that Sarah encountered her first serious challenge in the advanced training. Candidates were required to occupy concealed observation positions and identify specific details about activities in target areas, often at distances exceeding 1,000 yards. The level of detail required was extraordinary. License plate numbers, types of equipment, specific clothing descriptions, and behavioral patterns of personnel in the target area. This type of intelligence gathering required not only excellent optics and observation skills but also the ability to maintain focus and alertness for hours at a time. Sarah struggled initially with the sustained concentration required for extended observation missions. After 8 hours in a cramped observation position, watching a distant building through high-powered optics, she found herself fighting fatigue and losing focus on important details. Staff Sergeant Wilson, the marksmanship instructor who had encouraged her earlier, noticed her difficulties during a post-exercise debrief. "Martinez, your observation reports are lacking the detail we require," he said privately. In combat, missing small details can mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Sarah appreciated his direct feedback. "I understand, Sergeant. I'm having trouble maintaining focus during the longer observation periods. Do you have any suggestions for improvement?" Wilson studied her for a moment. "This is a common problem for new snipers. The key is developing mental techniques for staying alert without burning out. Try breaking your observation period into smaller segments, rotating between different types of surveillance, and using specific checklists to keep your mind engaged." His advice proved valuable. Sarah began approaching long observation missions with the same systematic methodology she used for precision shooting. She developed mental checklists and rotation schedules that kept her mind active and engaged throughout extended periods of surveillance. The improvement was immediate and dramatic. Her observation reports became models of thoroughness and accuracy, often including details that other candidates missed entirely. The instructors began using her reports as examples of the standard they expected from all candidates. But Sarah's success was beginning to create tension with some of her fellow candidates. The combination of her perfect marksmanship evaluation and her improving fieldcraft skills was making her stand out in ways that attracted both admiration and resentment from different members of the group. One evening, as the candidates were maintaining their equipment and preparing for the next day's training, Private First Class Davis approached Sarah with barely concealed hostility. "You know, Martinez, some of us are getting tired of watching. The instructors treat you like their favorite student," he said, his voice low but clearly audible to nearby candidates. Sarah looked up from cleaning her rifle, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm not sure what you mean, Davis. The instructors evaluate all of us by the same standards." "Do they?" Davis replied, his tone becoming more aggressive. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like they're going easy on you because of political pressure to graduate a female sniper. We all know this whole program is under scrutiny because of the women in combat controversy." The accusation stung because Sarah had worried about exactly this perception throughout the course. She had worked harder than anyone to ensure that her success could never be attributed to anything other than merit and skill. Sarah felt her jaw tighten at Davis's accusation, but she forced herself to remain calm and professional. The other candidates in the barracks had stopped their equipment maintenance and were clearly listening to the confrontation. waiting to see how she would respond to the direct challenge to her legitimacy. "Davis, high scores speak for themselves," Sarah replied evenly, not breaking eye contact. "I've earned everything I've achieved in this course through the same training and evaluations as everyone else." Davis stepped closer, his voice rising slightly. "Have you? Because I've been watching, and it seems like every time you make a mistake, the instructors give you extra guidance. When I miss a target, I get eliminated. When you struggle with observation techniques, you get personal coaching sessions." Several other candidates were now openly watching the confrontation, and Sarah could see expressions ranging from curiosity to agreement with Davis's accusations. She realized that this moment would define how her peers perceived her for the remainder of the course. "If you have concerns about the fairness of the evaluation process, I suggest you take them up with the instructors," Sarah said, standing up to face Davis directly. "But don't question my qualifications or my performance based on your assumptions about preferential treatment." Before Davis could respond, the barracks door opened and Staff Sergeant Wilson entered for the evening equipment inspection. The tension in the room was immediately apparent, and his experienced eyes quickly assessed the situation. "Is there a problem here?" Wilson asked, his voice carrying the authority that came from years of military leadership. Davis hesitated, clearly realizing that his accusations could have serious consequences if pursued formally. "No problem, Sergeant. Just discussing training techniques." Wilson's gaze moved between Davis and Sarah, understanding exactly what had transpired. "Good. Because let me be clear about something. Every candidate in this program is evaluated by identical standards. Success or failure is determined solely by performance, not by any other factor. Anyone who suggests otherwise is questioning the integrity of this institution and its instructors." The message was unmistakable, and Davis stepped back, his challenge effectively neutralized by Wilson's intervention. But Sarah knew that the underlying tensions hadn't been resolved. They had simply been driven underground, where they might emerge in more damaging ways. The next morning brought the most challenging exercise yet attempted, a 3-day field problem that would test every skill the candidates had learned. They would operate in pairs, conducting reconnaissance missions and precision shooting under realistic combat conditions while living in the field with minimal supplies. Sarah was paired with Corporal Jackson, a quiet professional from the 82nd Airborne Division who had maintained steady performance throughout the course without attracting much attention. Their assignment was to establish an observation position, overlooking a valley, and gather detailed intelligence on simulated enemy activities while remaining undetected by opposing force patrols. The exercise began before dawn, with the pairs departing from base camp at 15-minute intervals to avoid detection. Sarah and Jackson moved through the pre-dawn darkness using night vision equipment, navigating by compass and terrain features toward their assigned sector. Their designated observation position was a ridgeline approximately 2 miles from the target area, requiring them to move through dense forest while avoiding marked patrol routes used by the opposing force. The approach took nearly 4 hours of careful movement, with frequent stops to listen for enemy activity and confirm their navigation. When they reached their intended position, Sarah and Jackson discovered that the obvious observation site was too exposed and would likely be detected by enemy counter-sniper teams. They spent another hour moving along the ridgeline, looking for a position that offered good visibility of the target area while providing adequate concealment. They finally settled into a position behind a fallen tree, using natural vegetation and their ghillie suits to create a hide that was virtually invisible from more than 20 feet away. The position offered excellent visibility of the valley below, while providing multiple escape routes if they were discovered. For the next 18 hours, they maintained continuous observation of the target area, recording detailed information about personnel, vehicles, and activities while taking turns resting and eating. The mental discipline required for sustained observation was exhausting, but Sarah had learned to pace herself and maintain focus through the techniques Staff Sergeant Wilson had taught her. During the second day, their observation mission was complicated by the arrival of an opposing force patrol that established a checkpoint less than 300 yards from their position. Sarah and Jackson were forced to remain motionless for over 6 hours, while enemy personnel moved through the area, sometimes coming close enough that they could hear conversations. The stress of potential discovery while maintaining mission requirements tested every aspect of their training. They had to continue gathering intelligence while avoiding any movement or activity that might reveal their position to the nearby enemy forces. On the evening of the second day, their mission parameters changed dramatically. They received radio instructions to engage a high-value target that would appear in the target area the following morning. This transition from reconnaissance to direct action required them to prepare for precision shooting while maintaining their concealed position. Sarah checked and rechecked her rifle, ensuring that every component was functioning perfectly and that her ballistic calculations were accurate for the expected engagement range. The target would appear at approximately 600 yards, requiring perfect execution under the pressure of simulated combat conditions. Jackson would serve as her spotter, using high-powered optics to help identify the target and provide information about environmental conditions affecting the shot. Their teamwork had improved steadily throughout the exercise, and they had developed effective communication techniques that minimized noise and movement. The morning of the third day brought weather, complications that added another layer of difficulty to their mission. A light rain began falling before dawn, affecting visibility and requiring adjustments to their ballistic calculations. Wet conditions also made noise discipline more critical, as water dripping from vegetation could reveal their position. At precisely 800 hours, the target appeared in the valley below. Sarah identified the designated individual through her rifle scope, confirmed the identification with Jackson, and began her shooting sequence. The range was approximately 580 yards, with a slight crosswind that required careful calculation and precise execution. She took her time with the shot, knowing that this engagement would be evaluated as critically as any test she had faced during the course. The target remained stationary for less than 30 seconds before beginning to move toward cover, creating time pressure that tested her ability to execute under stress. Sarah's shot broke cleanly, and the target immediately fell, indicating a successful hit. The engagement had been perfect: quick target identification, accurate range estimation, correct ballistic calculation, and precise execution under combat conditions. But their mission wasn't complete. The simulated enemy forces would now begin searching for the sniper position, requiring Sarah and Jackson to execute their escape and evasion plan while avoiding capture. They had pre-positioned their equipment for rapid movement and had identified multiple escape routes during their initial reconnaissance. They moved quickly but quietly away from their position, using terrain features and vegetation to mask their movement while putting distance between themselves and the probable search area. The opposing forces were using realistic tactics, including helicopter searches and ground patrols, making their escape a genuine test of fieldcraft skills. After 6 hours of movement through difficult terrain, they reached their designated extraction point, where instructors were waiting to evaluate their performance. Both Sarah and Jackson were exhausted but confident that they had successfully completed one of the most challenging exercises in the course. Chief Warrant Officer Thompson debriefed them personally, reviewing their observation reports, mission execution, and escape procedures. "Outstanding work, both of you," he said after completing his evaluation. This exercise demonstrated the integration of skills that defines a qualified sniper team. He turned specifically to Sarah. "Martinez, your shot was textbook perfect. Range estimation, ballistic calculation, and execution were all flawless. Your observation reports showed exceptional attention to detail, and your fieldcraft during the escape phase was professional grade." Sarah felt a surge of pride at the recognition, but she also noticed the expression on Thompson's face, suggested there was more to his assessment. "However," he continued, "I want you to understand that completing this exercise successfully doesn't guarantee graduation from the program. The final phase will test your psychological readiness for the realities of sniper operations, and that evaluation is often the most difficult part of this course." The warning proved prophetic. The final week of training focused on scenario-based exercises designed to test the candidate's ability to make life-and-death decisions under extreme pressure. These scenarios presented moral and ethical dilemmas that had no clear right answers, forcing the candidates to confront the psychological realities of sniper warfare. The final week of sniper school brought psychological evaluations that pushed the remaining candidates beyond their comfort zones and into the moral complexities of modern warfare. Sarah found herself facing scenarios that required split-second decisions with life-and-death consequences, testing not just her technical skills but her mental resilience and moral judgment. The exercise that would define her future began on a humid Thursday morning. Sarah and her spotter, Corporal Martinez from the Rangers, were positioned on a rooftop overlooking a mock urban environment where actors played civilians and enemy combatants. Their mission was to provide overwatch for a patrol moving through the streets below, while being prepared to engage threats that might endanger friendly forces. As they settled into their position, Sarah methodically checked her rifle and equipment one final time. The weapon had become an extension of herself after weeks of intensive training, and the familiar weight and balance provided comfort in the stress of the final evaluation. She was calmly adjusting the scope settings when she heard footsteps on the stairs leading to their position. Staff Sergeant Morrison, one of the senior instructor snipers, emerged onto the rooftop carrying his own rifle and wearing a confident grin that immediately put Sarah on alert. Morrison had a reputation for psychological warfare against candidates, using mind games and pressure tactics to test their mental toughness under stress. Well, Morrison said, settling into a position next to Sarah and Martinez. Looks like the rookie thinks she can play with the big boys. His tone was casual, but Sarah detected the underlying challenge in his words. Sarah continued her equipment checks without responding, having learned that engaging with Morrison's provocations usually led to escalated confrontations that served no productive purpose. Her grandfather had taught her that silence was often the most powerful response to attempted intimidation. Morrison assembled his rifle with practiced efficiency, the movements of someone who had performed the same actions thousands of times in training and combat. When he finished, he glanced over at Sarah's setup with obvious skepticism. "That's an interesting way to configure your scope, Martinez," he said, his voice carrying just enough condescension to be insulting without being overtly disrespectful. "Of course, I suppose everyone has their own techniques." Sarah finally looked up from her rifle, meeting Morrison's gaze with calm confidence. "My configuration is based on the ballistic data for this specific rifle and ammunition combination, Sergeant. I've tested it extensively during training." Morrison's grin widened. "Oh, you've tested it extensively, have you? That's impressive for someone who's been shooting for what, 6 weeks?" He settled behind his own rifle, adjusting the scope with casual expertise. "Tell you what, rookie. Let's see if all that testing translates to actual performance." The challenge was unmistakable, and Sarah realized that Morrison was intentionally creating a high-pressure situation to test her psychological readiness for the stress of actual combat operations. This was likely part of the evaluation process, designed to see how candidates responded to peer pressure and competitive stress. Before Sarah could respond, their radio crackled with instructions from the exercise controller. "Overwatch positions. Be advised that the patrol is approaching the target building. Maintain vigilance for threats to friendly forces." Sarah shifted her attention to the street below, scanning through her rifle scope for any signs of hostile activity. The exercise scenario was designed to be realistic, with actors playing roles that could shift from innocent civilian to deadly threat based on scripted triggers that the candidates couldn't predict. Through her scope, Sarah could see the friendly patrol moving carefully through the mock urban environment, checking doorways and windows for potential threats. The patrol leader was using proper tactical movement techniques, but Sarah knew that scripted threats would emerge at predetermined moments to test the Overwatch team's ability to identify and engage hostile targets. Morrison, meanwhile, had settled into his shooting position with the relaxed confidence of someone completely comfortable with the situation. "You know, Martinez," he said quietly, "in my experience, the candidates who spend the most time adjusting their equipment are usually compensating for fundamental skill deficiencies." Sarah forced herself to ignore the comment and focus on the mission at hand. She had learned that Morrison's psychological tactics were designed to create exactly this type of distraction, and falling for his provocations would demonstrate the kind of mental weakness that could lead to elimination from the program. A movement in a second-story window caught her attention, and Sarah smoothly shifted her rifle to investigate. Through her scope, she could see an actor positioned with what appeared to be a weapon, but the angle and lighting made positive identification difficult. "Contact, second floor southeast corner building," Sarah reported quietly into her radio. maintaining her focus on the potential threat while providing information to the patrol below. Morrison glanced over at her position, then shifted his own rifle toward the same area. "I don't see anything definitive," he said, his voice carrying subtle doubt about Sarah's judgment. "You sure you're not seeing shadows?" Sarah maintained her observation of the window, waiting for the actor to provide clearer indication of hostile intent. The scenario was designed to test the candidate's ability to make correct identification decisions under pressure, with penalties for both failing to engage legitimate threats and engaging non-combatant targets. The figure in the window moved again, and Sarah could see the distinctive outline of a rifle being positioned toward the patrol below. The threat was real and immediate, requiring immediate action to protect the friendly forces. "Definite threat, second floor window," Sarah transmitted, settling into her final shooting position. Preparing to engage, Morrison shifted his position to observe the same target area. "Try hitting this, rookie," he said with obvious skepticism, his tone suggesting he expected her to miss the shot. The challenge crystallized everything Sarah had worked toward during her months of training. This moment represented not just a test of marksmanship, but a test of her ability to perform under pressure while dealing with doubt and skepticism from experienced operators. Sarah controlled her breathing and settled into the focused mental state that had become her trademark. The target was approximately 400 yards away, requiring precise calculation and perfect execution to ensure the safety of the patrol below. She estimated the range, calculated wind effects, and confirmed her point of aim with methodical precision. The shot broke cleanly, and the target in the window immediately fell backward, indicating a successful hit. The timing was perfect, just seconds before the scripted threat would have engaged the patrol with simulated fire. "Outstanding shot," came the voice of the exercise controller over the radio. "Threat neutralized, patrol is secure." Sarah maintained her position, scanning for additional threats while professionally acknowledging the successful engagement. She had proven her ability to perform under pressure while dealing with psychological challenges from a peer. Morrison was quiet for a moment, his confident demeanor replaced by genuine respect. "That was a hell of a shot, Martinez," he said finally, his tone completely different from his earlier provocations. Range estimation, wind calculation, and execution were all perfect. Sarah looked over at him, surprised by the sudden change in his attitude. "Thank you, Sergeant," Morrison nodded slowly. "I've been testing candidates for 3 years, and that was one of the best pressure shots I've seen. You didn't let my mind games affect your performance, and you executed when it mattered most." The realization hit Sarah that Morrison's behavior had been entirely deliberate, a final test of her psychological readiness for the mental challenges that snipers faced in combat operations. His skepticism and challenges had been designed to create exactly the type of pressure she would face in real-world operations. The exercise continued for another hour, with several additional engagement scenarios that tested various aspects of the candidate's training. Sarah performed consistently well, demonstrating the integration of technical skills and mental toughness that defined successful sniper operations. When the final exercise concluded, the remaining candidates gathered for the graduation ceremony that would determine who had successfully completed one of the military's most demanding courses. Of the 24 soldiers who had begun the program 7 weeks earlier, only 11 remained eligible for graduation. Chief Warrant Officer Thompson addressed the group with characteristic directness. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have successfully completed the United States Army Sniper School. You have demonstrated the technical skills, mental toughness, and professional judgment required to serve as precision marksmen in combat operations." Sarah felt overwhelming emotions as Thompson continued his remarks. The months of preparation, the weeks of intensive training, and the constant pressure to prove herself had all led to this moment of recognition and achievement. "Each of you has earned the right to wear the Crossed Rifles badge and to serve in sniper positions within your respective units," Thompson continued. "But remember that graduation from this course is just the beginning of your development as precision marksmen. Continued training, practice, and professional development will determine your effectiveness in combat operations." As the ceremony concluded, and the new snipers received their badges and certificates, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this achievement. She thought about her grandfather's lessons about persistence and precision, the skepticism she had faced as a woman in a male-dominated field, and the personal growth that had resulted from pushing beyond every limit she had imagined. Staff Sergeant Morrison approached her after the ceremony, extending his hand with obvious respect. "Martinez, I owe you an apology for some of my comments during training, but I also want you to know that your performance in this course has been exceptional. You've earned every bit of recognition you're receiving today." Sarah shook his hand, appreciating both his apology and his acknowledgement of her achievements. "Thank you, Sergeant. I understand that your challenges were part of the training process." Morrison nodded. "The psychological pressure you faced here was nothing compared to what you'll experience in combat operations. But if today's performance is any indication, you're ready for whatever challenges lie ahead." As Sarah prepared to return to her unit with her new qualifications and responsibilities, she knew that her journey as a sniper was just beginning. The technical skills and mental toughness she had developed would be tested in real-world operations, where the stakes would be measured in lives rather than graduation certificates. But she also knew that she had proven something important, that determination, skill, and professional dedication mattered more than gender stereotypes or traditional expectations. She had earned her place among the military's elite precision marksmen through merit alone, and that achievement would open doors to opportunities she had never imagined possible.